Well, hello, Nick. How you doing?
Wrecker, my brother, what's happening?
Oh, I am just so excited. This is a story you don't know. See, in 2015, I think I was being nominated. I was being asked to be the editor in chief of the communications of the AIS. We never talked about this really. So what happened is in June 2015, I flew up to Helsinki to learn from Matti Rossi, which was the outgoing editor in chief, and he kind of took me under his wings and told me all about the journal. And it so happened that at that time I was in Helsinki and Suprateek Sarker was there because at that time he was editor in chief of JAIS. And we had a
Right.
lovely dinner and I learned a lot from them. And of course, now it's 8 years later and I'm not nothing anymore. And Supra went from being the editor in chief of JAIS to now the editor in chief of ISR. What a career. I mean, and that's great. I've been looking forward to this because now we have him on here today. Supra, how are you?
Hey, good to see you all. See you both. Happy to be here.
So, Supra, I think you've got a problem here with time management. This is my suspicion, right? You are editor in chief of ISR, and you are the president of AIS, and you do a million other things too, including write papers, and you're doing service there at University of Virginia. What do you? I mean, seriously, what's up with this? What you? How do you fit everything in?
Hey, Nick, I have to add another significant one. That is ICIS conference chair.
No, you're
You're
kidding
the
me.
conference
Oh,
chair
of
at
course you
Hyderabad?
are.
So,
Holy hell. Yes, my
so
goodness.
all these were not planned, right? They were not supposed to all happen, but they did. And so while
Wow.
I'm very grateful that I have the opportunity, yes, some days I feel like, I'm just floating um,
Wow.
from one activity to the other.
Why did you do this to yourself? Like, you can't say no?
You can't say no. You can't possibly say
No,
no.
it so happened. You know the story of ISR. I was not really in the running, but
Yeah.
somehow it so happened that I got selected.
Yeah.
And so, what do you say if someone selects you to be ISR EIC? You say, "Sorry, I'm the IS president, so I won't do it." Uh,
No.
but, but none of these things were supposed to happen simultaneously. But
Yeah.
Well,
I am doing what I can and trying to stay afloat and trying to do reasonable justice to each of these roles.
well, I mean, Supra, first up, I mean, this is the most amazing commitment to a community they've ever heard of, right? If you think about it, you're running the biggest journal, I mean, one of the top journals, whatever, the biggest conference and the entire community all at the same time. I mean, if there ever was a reason to give anyone one of these service and community and lifetime achievements awards, I mean, this has got to be it. This is just amazing. And I do hope you're doing okay and you get time to sleep and, and the time with family and everything else that comes with this. This is just amazing. What a commitment.
Thank
Yeah.
you. It is all serendipitous. It just happened. And each time I feel, oh, I'm sinking, I say, well, I asked for it. Or
Yeah.
at some point in my life, I would have loved to have this. So I have no right
Yeah.
to complain. I just
No.
run as fast as I can.
Wow.
So here's the deal, Supra. I've badmouthed AIS a little bit on the podcast, and people like my advisor, Kalle Littinen, came and smacked me down and told me, listen, I'm being disrespectful to people who came before and did so much. So I want to talk about AIS. We also talked about Hyderabad and ISIS. And, I'm not going. I decided I'm not going to ISIS's in December, and we've talked about this. And then I got chastised by a lot of listeners for that too, because they thought I was somehow not excited about India. So I want to talk about both those. But before we get to those, can we talk about ISR? Because
Okay.
the thing I'm most excited about is I want to hear what you're doing with the journal. I want to know what your plan is. Are you going to be different? Because, all right, for just in case listeners don't have a sense of this, in IS, the top two journals are, of course, MISQ and ISR, right? And some people will actually say that outside of the IS field, and it depends which country you're in and that sort of thing. But some folks, of course, think MIS Quarterly is really our flight. But then others, especially outside of our field in the US, if you're saying an operations department or something like that, ISR is oftentimes the only journal because it's informs, right? Because it's got that history. So in the Operations Research Society, right? So ISR is really a compelling, important And I want your ideas on it. But before, I think there's something interesting about ISR because you and I are qualitative researchers. And the way I look back at ISR, and I go back to the 1990s, Bert Swanson, John King, and Wanda Orlikowski's work, right? Some of the greatest qualitative work in our field was in ISR. And you look at the last decade or so, there is great qualitative work, but it's not a qualitative journal anymore, right? In the sense. So I want to talk to you about these two things, but I don't know, what are your thoughts on the journal and what you're planning to do with it?
So, Nick, let me be a little bit immodest, okay? In talking about ISR, I think, the community that I was deeply embedded in before I got involved with ISR, first as senior editor and then as EIC, was MISQ ISR, right? MISQ being always considered earlier than ISR. But as I've started engaging with the ISR community, right, and also, as you said, with the other disciplines outside of IS, it is clearly ISR MIS quarterly.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And so that's a very interesting sort of revelation even to me. Okay. Yeah. And I would like to say, I would like to see MISQ ISR, ISR MISQ, at the same level.
Yeah.
Such that they are both truly outstanding journals. They do almost the same thing, but slightly different things, right?
When you say slightly different, how would you characterize that?
Okay, so just, taking it from the state where, Alok brought it to, right? Yeah. So just before I became EIC, I think you will agree that ISR's strength in machine learning, data science, quantitative analytical approaches is unparalleled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's no question. That doesn't say MISQ doesn't do a good job and MISQ doesn't have the best people or among the best people. But I think the depth of expertise of ISR in these areas is unbelievable. And I'm beginning to understand the level of expertise the people have. On the other hand, I think ISR has not been very successful or effective in trying to bring in some of the other communities. It's not that ISR has been absent, but I know a lot of my colleagues and friends in kinds of research that I do or want to do, they're not quite sure about ISR. They will submit to ISR hoping for the best, but sometimes they are not following, like they won't look at the POC every issue.
Yeah.
So they're not fully engaged with it. And so I think that is the primary thing that I'm trying to address, where I keep the strengths of ISR, as anyone should, right? But sort of enhance the design science research, the data science, the qualitative and behavioral research, because behavioral researchers, the traditional behavioral researchers, they feel threatened. So my goal has been to give pathways or channels for each kind of research, for virtually every combination of research, whether it's computational, whether it is design science, whether it is game theory, economics. So the goal of the board that we currently have, and you are free to take a look at it, is that you will have a pathway irrespective of what the genre, methodology, or theoretical perspective you have.
Right.
I think, Supra, this is clearly visible, right? I'm looking at the board of senior editors at the moment. I will say that this is the most diverse methodologically I've seen it in at least a decade, right? So you got the traditions you just mentioned, whether behavioral survey, I see Jason, I see Sean, I see design science, Jeff Parsons is there. There's more qualitative folks that I've ever seen in a long time. So clearly this is represented. If you look at the editorial board, you have these different people represented. I wanted to say this one thing. See, what Nick said is, ISR is not a place for qualitative people. To be honest, in the last 2 to 3 years, I don't want to go further back than this, but I thought over the last 2 to 3 years, I thought that is a prejudice that doesn't actually live up to reality. In the last couple of years, I've seen some wonderful, absolutely wonderful qualitative work come through. My superstition is I think that was all you. I think this was all the qualitative papers you handled as senior editors. But I think it's, what I'm saying is it's not a place where you couldn't submit qualitative work. It was by and large was less than the others. But I do think, like you said, Nick, I mean, there's a history of some very powerful qualitative papers in ISR. Always has been, but especially so in the last couple of years. Now it seems every issue there's a really great qualitative paper, no?
Yeah, I think out of 18 papers, we have typically one qualitative paper. There have been years where there have been none. So, Ola, myself, we've done what we could. But I think given that qualitative research have longer cycle times, right? Yeah. Obviously, and with a bandwidth of one person, one SE, there's only so much we can do. Yeah. Because there's not this buzz that qualitative research is something that ISR is investing in a big way. I think now you can see three very different kinds of qualitative researchers.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, who are very versatile, even if you don't count me. And I'm still handling quite a few papers. And so, you have Yunjin Yu, who's, everyone knows him. Sandeep Sahai, he's unbelievable. Yes. I mean, if you're going in the ICT for D and that kind of area, social theories, he's fantastic. Avor is fantastic. So I think I'm looking forward to a tsunami of qualitative submissions.
Aha, yes. You know what's funny? There are a lot. You mentioned three. But you have these cool generalists, people like Elena and Manju and actually Jeffrey Parsons, right? Jeff Parsons, I think, can handle anything, right? So it's like not only the three you mentioned, but there are a lot of Jason Thatcher, right? There are these people who can do qualitative, right? And have done well, right?
And I actually want to position ISR as very welcoming to mixed methods.
Ooh, that's interesting.
If you think of not only the diversity of methodologies represented, but also people with overlapping, like machine learning with interpretive research, machine learning with econometrics, that is well established, right? Survey with interviews, that's well established. We recently did a paper with, Ola was the accepting editor, with game theory with interpretive research using the hermeneutic circle.
Wait, this was published?
It's forthcoming. I don't know how good that is, but it is unusual.
All right, I have a formal model and a qualitative paper combined, so simulation and qualitative. We should send it to ISR, is what you're telling me. We're about ready to submit.
Absolutely. I mean, who knows whether it gets accepted? But the fact of the matter is that we are trying to. That is, I think, an edge ISR has. Right. In the end, the top two journals are quite isomorphic.
They're similar.
But if you think of a forced differentiation, it would be, more analytical design, data science focus being the strength in ISR. I think ISR has invested less in new theories, but that doesn't mean we won't handle theories. We have people pretty strong in theory who can handle it. Obviously, JIS, my favorite journal, about which we spoke about even in my president's address, that people need to put their, support behind JIS rather than say, oh, let it wait a few more years to become I think we really need to put our sort of.
I think we've gotten there too. We don't need to wait at all. Like it's gone there, right? If you look at the trajectory from, at least with Shirley, you, and now Dorothy. What I wanted to say is it's funny sometimes these reputations of the journals. I think they change much slower than reality, right? So JIS in the minds of some, at least, is still not a top journal. ISR is still not a qualitative journal, and so sometimes these reputations are not really catching up as fast as, let's say, because the reality is the editorial board is really what matters. I mean, if I look around there now, and I see a lot of A's as well, they can handle a lot of different papers, and that means that's the kind of stuff I can submit there. That's real. It doesn't matter what they published 5 years ago.
I absolutely agree. I think that's the point, and I presume that was the reason why I got selected from nowhere, is because I would preserve the strength of ISR as it stood, and then sort of increase the accessibility to the journal.
No, Supra, I'll tell you right now why you were picked for ISR. Number one, You're the nicest guy in our field. I don't know a single person that doesn't absolutely love you. You're a warm. When I was a PhD student, and senior people could give a crap about PhD students, you were kind. You would sit and talk for a while. When I was a brand, you just have that about you, that you're a generous of spirit. And you know what? And I find that those are the most brilliant people and the best people, most productive, are usually generous of spirit and kind, not just to their peers, but also to the poor little PhD students and everything. So I think you're that, and everyone knows that. So you're universally liked and respected. And I also think what you did at JAIS. I mean, every editor in chief, as far as I know, bumped it up a little, and it was like this progression of just always getting better and better. I think under your watch, the argument could be made, right? It was always MISQ, ISR, and then kind of JMIS after those two. And then the rest were down in the pack. During your watch, you pulled JAIS up to that same conversation with JMIS, from my perspective, right? I think Dorothy's doing a great job, and I think they saw what you did with JAIS, and they're like, okay, this is clearly someone who knows how to strengthen a journal, not just sit on it, right? And that's my suspicion as to why you were tapped, right?
And I do not have a belief that what my positioning is with respect to research as a researcher should have much bearing on me, the editor. Right? I have a certain belief about how qualitative research needs to be done, and I've written about that in the JIS editorial 2018.
Yeah,
that's a good one. I don't that in every paper I edit, because if I did that, right, many papers would be rejected right off the bat.
Absolutely.
But that's what I had to share, and that's what I have shared. Now, if people don't want to follow it, that's okay. I think as editors, we also need to remember that we play many roles, right? We play gatekeeper role, we play the diamond cutter role, we play facilitator role, we play champion role, we play all these roles. And we have to keep a balance between what our priorities are as an individual and what the priorities are of the author and of the discipline. And I think, and you all are experienced editors, but I remember these were things I learned. I became SE in 2009 in MIS Quarterly. And so that's a long time back. And I think it's been a big learning experience. And sometimes I feel I don't do too much justice, because when time goes and you have too many things to do, and you must be reaching that level that the report qualities sort of start become, well, can I put in 100% for every paper? But I think the key thing is to be just. The key thing is to have an eye for this could be a good paper. And then we have such a strong board. I'm just amazed at the kinds of reports that the A's write. Really amazed. And so because we have such a strong team,
the one thing before we get off the JAIS topic, since you are also president of AIS before you go out, I have a tactic for you that I'd like you to adopt or at least think about. We've always been talking about getting JAIS up into that league, and it was always kind of down with the ISJs and JITs and AEGISs of high quality journals, but not MISQ ISR, right? I think the number one way you could now catapult JAIS up to that category as AIS president before you leave is to take that journal list. You know how right now it's basket of 8, and now they've extended it to another 3 and all this. Instead of extending the AIS journal list, the count where people post their counts and everything, reduce it to just the top 4. ISR, MISQ, JMIS, and JAIS. The effect of that would be that everyone will send their best work to those 4 because they want to be on that list, right? And you will immediately catapult JAIS to the true flagship of our field where it belongs, right? I think that one little move could do that.
Good suggestion. But, you also have to, while you and I may be interested in promoting JIS, we must be very careful that we don't disenfranchise the other very good journals, right? Indeed, in Venki's ranking system, I don't know if that's the right label for it. He has the best 2, the next 2.
He does.
So there is an implicit sort of ranking there. But I hesitate to do anything to undermine any other journal in the quest to sort of promote JIS. So, that's just me.
Yep.
I want JIS to sort of bubble up because of the things it's doing. So if you think of, my term, and of course, I inherited a fantastic, intellectually rich journal from Shirley, and Khalil Utinen and all the others who came behind.
Yeah.
I think what I did is I expanded and increased its sort of readership and people who were engaged. And I think what Dorothy is doing brilliantly, and this is my perspective, I've not checked this with her, is now sort of creating a higher quality bar.
Yes, I agree.
Because when I came in, if I tried to do that, I would have a narrow stream, which would become narrower. So I have to first work on how to sort of broaden the appeal and get it on as many lists as possible. I remember lobbying to all the different universities to put them in the list. And actually, we got it in many lists, including Georgia, including Oklahoma. And they were like, yeah, it's sort of there, but not there. But at least it was officially there. And so now I think it's the right time for a top scholar like Dorothy to now say, okay, now let's squeeze the quality. And I think that's a very nice sort of combination of things, and I think it will ramp up to the next level soon. I mean, it's a matter of suddenly FT putting you in the list, right?
Yeah.
At one point, the pressure will be so much that they can't resist it.
Right.
I've been putting some pressure on UTD, saying that, okay, let us create sort of a list of provisional or some, what do you call that? You are on probation.
Yes.
Right?
Okay.
Take every discipline and take one or two journals that are on probation for the next 3 years and put that as a public thing. I think JIS will become whatever it is not. JIS already does whatever it can do given its rank.
Yeah.
But once you put it at, that sort of situation, and I have actually pitched this to UTD because they feel, this will spoil the equilibrium. So give it 3 years. After you say, I need these 10 things and let it be public, I think JIS will become...
Well, here's the problem with UTD. UTD is a list made for 1970, right? There are like a whole bunch of... The fact is the digital age is, IS type outlets are really prominent and they don't reflect the interest in the sorts of things we do.
But UTD and, to a lesser extent, FT are lists that are seen by the powerful schools, right? Yeah. By the way, FT has mixed up some good journals with bad journals. And recently I received, and I write lots of letters, obviously. One school asked me FT minus these 12 journals.
FT 38.
So it's a very sort of self-correcting, that's the baseline, but don't consider these 12. So it's interesting that schools are finding a way to make sure that journals are of similar merit.
But you got to say, look, the way that I see it, because I think we're putting way too much emphasis on this, the good ideas and the good research will win out, and it tends to even win out over the outlets where we publish them. Even in the FT 50 minus 12, there will be good papers. And in the the UT Dallas from 1970, the first 20 or something that they had, there will be bad papers. And, the marketplace for ideas kind of usually sorts these things out. I think for our discipline, I think we've come a very long way over the last 10 to 15 years, especially. And, and to the credit of you and everybody else, including Dorothy, of course, that have bumped up and professionalized and really increased the quality of journals. I mean, I see this in our schools, in the business schools here in Europe, that how highly they speak of the IS journals, whether it be folks from marketing or sociology or economics and whatever, right? So that's the reality. And that was not the case, let's say 2005. Supra, you said so many really interesting things. Can I just go back to some of them? You started off when you talked about your time at MIS Quarterly and then now with Informs and ISR. And I kind of heard you saying that these are two different communities. Do you think so? Are these literally two sets of people? One is the AIS MISQ world. The other one is the ISR Inform worlds with much overlap, little overlap. Can you talk about this?
I think there's much overlap. Yeah, I think there is much overlap. But, it's okay to have an inclination in a certain direction. MISQ has been more organizational, behavioral traditionally. Now, of course, Arun and Andrew have sort of moved it much more central to where our discipline is. And so we have serious design science, we have predictive analytics, and all sorts of things. Econometrics, we have everything in MIS Quarterly. I think it is okay to have a little bit of differentiation.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Because otherwise we would have two duplicates. But I think it is important not to have a niche journal as a top journal, because what it does is it reduces the chance of, basically what you are saying is you're silencing part of the community. So you're almost sort of creating a condition where a certain kind of scholar gets tenured, promoted in all the good schools, while people who are exceptional in other genres, they sort of become the next tier. And I know this very well, because when I graduated, it was a joke to be a qualitative researcher unless you were a superstar. But I think what we have been able to do, people like Natalia, myself, and I can mention many people, is create this middle group of scholars who are also sort of playing in that field, and they are sort of shining, they are doing a good job. And I think that's the thing that we now take for granted, which wasn't the case when, say, for example, Alan Lee became EIC. Yeah. It was not an obvious thing that today you submit qualitative research with pride and you say, yeah, I have a good chance. That was not the situation at all. There were superstars who could get in, but others could not, in caps.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think that because of people like you and others, paved the way for people like me, where I just enjoy this, where qualitative people are respected. I'm sitting at a table with whoever, like in my department, I've got Corey Angst, who does primarily econometrics. We've got Ahmed Abbasi, who's kind of a computer scientist, design science guy. We're together, same conversation, right? And I think that, maybe, and you've told me this, right? In the 90s, for example, that wasn't necessarily the case, right?
No.
Where you'd be sitting at the...
Even design scientists couldn't sit on that table. They were like, okay, you are an outcast computer scientist, which is a pity, because how can you have a socio-technical discipline without having a technical component?
Yes, true.
Right?
So if you're at the edges of the discipline, it appears that sometimes you get privileged because you are specialized in, you seem to be sort of more novel, right? When you're more at the center, you get shot by both sides.
Right.
Kind of papers that we should be producing as unique to our discipline, they sort of lose out, and we are all tempted to go at the edges. We don't need to eliminate those at the edges. They bring a lot of energy into our discipline.
Well, Supra, so this is the interdisciplinary nature of our field, and this is the problem. And I always like to joke that, if Herb Simon were an IS researcher, he could have never, won his Nobel Prize or whatever, because he got it on bounded rationality. Yeah. And if you look at bounded rationality as it won a Nobel Prize because he told economists that what William James knew in 1890, right? If you read, Simon is a Jamesian, and psychologists knew that, right? They knew the limits of attention. Everything he wrote in administrative behavior is kind of psychologically informed. And the economists didn't know that, so they gave him a Nobel Prize. If he were to write an IS research, then the psychologists would look at him and say, we know this, reject, right? Nothing new here. And that's our problem as a field, is that, you'll get a psychological, a sociological, an economic, a computer science, and someone will say, in our field, we know that already. For our special issue record, Young Jin ran it by a computer scientist, and the computer scientist looked down the topics of the special issue. We had one doing imaging in a hospital, another one doing another one of the papers
AI
doing
and hiring.
Hiring.
Exactly.
Yeah, and the computer scientist was like, oh yeah, we've been doing all this stuff for like decades. There's nothing your field has to offer, right?
I have two views on this. I mean, number one, I think this core of the discipline, the big difference that I see here is that over the last 20, 30 years, we have actually grown a generation of IS researchers that come from within the field, not from outside the field. And that was different in the 90s and 2000s, because we were still people from the outside, from the economics, and they do IS strategy, from psychology, and they did a behavioral level IS research. They were not trained as IS researchers. Like the generation that sort of I represent, we've come from within our field. So we naturally come out of the core, and we tend to go to the fringe now. Right. So we move away from behavioral, intra-organizational stuff. And now we're looking at, let's go and explore that org science connection. Let's go and explore that machine learning connection. Let's go and explore that economics direction, but not from economics into IS, but from IS into economics. I mean, look at all the students that people like Martin Bichler and others have, right? So they're IS students, and they have been from the undergrad days. And now they're talking to the economists, and they have the flip side problems. Now they have to go to the economist and say, "I'm a real economist here. I'm studying digital phenomena, but I'm also playing with you." So I find that very interesting what you're saying here.
Jan, this is very insightful, and I think it's a journey for our discipline, right? We are also evolving, but I think as we evolve, as we try to conquer the world of digitalness, right? I think we need to be very careful in terms of what is the unique value proposition we bring. I think that should not be used as a constraint to reject papers, but that should be seen as an ideal, right? So I tell the doctoral students, when they're formulating the dissertation, think in those terms. I would not like an editor to say this paper is rejected because this seems too organizational or too statistical. I think that is not the right way to do it. I think it is formulating the culture where we create this value proposition that there's something unique that we have to offer. Otherwise, we have to compete and be better than the computer scientists, the organization theorists with the AMJ, AMR that have started, shall I say, poaching on digital.
Well, all right. Not only are they poaching, Supra, they're doing a crappy job of it. And this is the thing that annoys me. While we're sending papers to ISR and MISQ, and they're getting beaten the crap out of and rejected, much inferior papers are getting published in whatever, SMJ, marketing science, org, I don't know, other places. I don't want to bring up, but handling our topic. But since we're so rough on each other, here's a clever idea. You could just do 2 rounds and publish it. Instead, it's going 6 rounds and a rejection. I mean, we're so brutal to each other. And it's like no one has the confidence to do 2 things, right? One is edit, right? Everybody just vote counts. As editors, we should just be like, this is good, get it in, knowing every paper's flawed. And then the other thing is being risk averse, right? It has to be perfect. We can't just publish something, I don't know. What do you think about that? Like, how can we change that where we actually publish the interesting things? And of course, they should be rigorous.
2 things, Nick. One is we should stop sort of being overawed by journals in other disciplines. That's the first thing we need to do. It's like, okay, we are on the same level field, and we do our best, and we learn from others, but we don't sort of pay obeisance to every other discipline in the world. I think that is a issue of pride and issue of developing the competence.
And confidence. I think it's an issue of confidence. We haven't had that because we've always still in this mindset of we need to develop and defend our main existence. So we've never been in a position where we could go out and say, we're just as good as you are. Because we've always played oh my God, we're little ones. We need to get to your level. No, I think we've reached that level quite a while ago.
Yes. And second, Nick, regarding our editorial issue, remember I said something like, we are gatekeepers. Yes. We are champions. We play many roles. I think the most important thing when we do this championing is to not show that I champion only Nick's papers. I think the champion is most valuable when it is done to new people with new ideas without a single brand name co-author. That is where I feel championing has credibility. Yeah. If I champion a superstar's paper, that has no credibility. I mean, it may be a good paper, but they are fine. They are doing okay. But then it gets into, why did I choose this paper to champion and not the other, right?
Well, based on the content, right? And I agree with you. It shouldn't be just based on person, right? I shouldn't do it because I respect Supra or Wrecker, so I'm going to champion your paper. It should be you wrote a cool paper with a cool data set that other people can't get, or whatever. You have a clever idea, just publish the damn clever idea. And I don't care whether it's Supra writing it or some unknown person from the other side of the globe.
No, but I think
it.
Supra means something slightly different. I mean, Supra, if I understood you correctly, you were saying like, look, if you want to pride yourself as an editor, you should measure your own editor's worth by the question of how many papers did you champion without any superstar on there? How often did you actually give that junior team with a maybe scratchy idea, whatever? How often did you help them leverage new ideas? Rather than saying, I'm the guy that's, actually published a lot of papers, but they've all been by the top 10 guys in our field that know inside out how to write a paper and how to handle a revision. And I think there's truth to that because, one of the mistakes, of course, is, of course, with inexperienced teams is, for example, how effective their revisions are. Right. So a well-seasoned veteran knows exactly how to interpret a response letter, how to respond to it, what strategies would be very effective in flipping reviatur on and all that sort of stuff. And junior team without that senior experience may not have that. And so sometimes they can run into the danger of their revision not being very welcomed and so forth.
And Wrecker, this is where an editor kicks in, right? Because this is the problem with editors. Editors will sit there and assume you're a senior person, and they'll turn around and give you, deal with these 3 reviewers, and, I'm not going to write your paper for you, so just figure it out. And it's like, the find me a rock or bring me a rock kind of thing. We had a whole episode super on the bring me a rock, right? Just make it better and then send it back, right? And a good editor will say, do A, B, and C, right? Like an editor in a magazine. This should be your headline. This should be your lit review. This is what your conclusion is. Now go do it. And then it works with those junior folks who maybe don't have the advantages of the people who were, either superstars or trained by superstars or whatever. Right. So directive AEs, SEs that are very specific. Do A, B, and C. You do A, B, and C well, you're in. Right. I never see that. I always say, well, high risk revision. It's your paper, not mine. Do this vague stuff and bring me a rock next time around. And then I'll judge you again. A good editor would be like, hey, listen, I like this idea. Do A, B, and C. You're in. You never see that.
I believe in what you are saying, but think of it. Is it so easy to do? Right? Especially in the age when you are managing so many papers. If I manage 1 paper a month, the kind of work I can do on that paper, because then it's a craft. Right now, we are in a machine sort of mode. And so you really have to choose that I'm going to invest on this paper. Recently, I did invest in 1 paper because of the very unusual message that I felt the community needs to hear. Actually, most of the initial reviews were quite against. And I would say this will be a super hit paper because of the message. So occasionally we are lucky with that kind of thing. But really, as I have grown senior, in age at least, I have found that I simply don't have the bandwidth to do what I could do in 2009.
I wanted to piggyback on this because you said something like this earlier, and I wrote it down here on my notes as senior editor fatigue. You said earlier a similar thing. You asked Nick whether, you notice after you've been an editor for like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years that, it's harder and harder to really put all the attention to this. So, and I wanted to ask you this, whether we as a field, as we have grown enormously, whether we have the issue that still our editorial boards are still the same people. And in fact, we're still, to put it very bluntly, why is it only Supra that can run ISR? You've just handled JIS. In fact, you're the only person in the history that handled 2 of our top journals as editor-in-chief. And, if I look at the board, they are the well-known and well-respected people. But then again, they've all already had 5 SE terms at ISR or other journals. And, there's an amazing group of scholars out there that are not A's and not SE's, etc. So I guess my provocative question is sort of like, are we limiting? It's still the same gatekeepers, and they're overloaded as hell because we don't trust the young and up and coming scholars. Is that an issue that we have as a field?
I think we should have a portfolio approach, and I hope that's what we are doing in ISR. If you look at the editorial board, Jan, you will see there is a ERB.
Yes, I did see that. Yeah.
Right. And if you look at the names, I mean, they're all significant scholars. Many of them have been AEs in top journals. There are even some SEs from JIS. But the important thing is that we need a system of promotion. So basically, what I intend to do is in the next 2 years, I want to promote some of these to the AE role.
Yeah.
And they will be doing some guest AE role before when they are sort of strongly being considered. So it is a very data-oriented, prove yourself approach.
I love that.
While some of the A's will be getting a chance to do guest SEs, and they will then move to that role.
I like that.
Obviously, I'm here for 3 years, possibly. So there's only so much I can do, and I have to design the board in such a way that when I go away, the next EIC may choose not to do this at all. So I have to sort of keep it self-contained and create some change in the next 3 years. I'm fifth month in my position. So those are little things I'm trying to do. I think building the next generation is very important.
Yeah. So Supra, as an SE, I have a strategy that I follow, and I'm curious to know your thoughts on this. But usually, basically, this is where I am, because I've seen so many situations where an SE will just send a paper they know will be rejected for whatever reason, political reasons, because they see a celebrity on the paper, or, they're just lazy. So they immediately send it out. So what I do is I read a paper closely, and my default is desk reject unless I think I can publish this paper. The moment I think that there's any doubt that it's a rejection, right, then I send it out to review. And then once I send it out to review and I'm using an AE and these valuable reviewer resources, I'm assuming I'm publishing the paper, right? And then sometimes in that first round, I realize I missed something big, and then I might still have to reject. But in general, if I'm sending to review, that means I want to publish it. If I'm pretty sure I'm not going to publish it, I don't use reviewers. I just reject the thing on my own because and I wonder if we had this mindset a little more with editors, where it's like, listen, give it a desk revision or a desk rejection. Don't use these valuable reviewers because they're all burned out. And when you think you can publish a paper, then use reviewers to make it. But editors are lazy. They just send it out, vote count, don't summarize, and waste tons of resources. And then the same paper gets published, sent to MISQ, 3 reviewers reject. Then it's sent to ISR, 3 reviewers reject. Then it's sent to JAIS, another 3. It's like by the time you get to the 4th journal, you've just used 12 reviewers, right, to reject a paper that could have easily been handled by editors. Do you like that strategy, or is there a flaw with it?
I like that strategy, but I wouldn't make that the official position. So let me give you my thoughts. My thoughts are that there are 2 quite different philosophy on desk reject. One philosophy is sort of what you said, that the screening is very hard. So when something goes through, now it has a high probability of getting published. So basically what you are doing is you are making some upfront judgments about the manuscript. And part of it may be based on superficial elements. And I'm not saying specifically about you, like, it's not written well or sloppy or didn't cite the right people, whatever. And this is not totally, I would say, I wouldn't support this fully.
Yeah, because those are fixable.
Especially in the era where we are trying to say we embrace diversity, we want this global participation. And instead of looking at the core, especially by core specialists, that, this core material is really good and let us make the paper happen. Rather than that, it would get eliminated very fast. The second thing, and being a not so successful author for a long time, I felt that the successful folks have a sort of dismissive attitude to things that don't fit exactly how they do it. Right? We have to be a little careful about that. So for that reason, for me, the desk reject filter is much sort of softer, right? And where do I lose there? I burn more resources, right? Whereas, so is there a perfect model? There isn't. But we need to conserve the resources, but at the same time, not sort of destroy or discriminate against certain papers because they didn't do one, two, three, four things which got caught in screen.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is you don't have a problem with the desk reject. You don't have confidence in people's, I guess, judgment in making those decisions based on non-superficial issues, right? And I would say if we can't trust the judgment of our senior editors, then we should not have them as senior editors.
I look at it
right?
differently. I would say what I heard is, look, I think there are cases where your desk reject strategy is exactly the right one. But by and large, you can't generalize that to all submissions you're going to get. I can also think of some other situations where it's actually a really good idea to still send it out to give them proper feedback, even if it's just a developmental kind of thing to do. Anyway, so what I'm saying is it really is a case by case. And what that and then implies that as a senior editor, especially as a senior editor, you should only commit to this role if you know you can do it the next 3 years. And I think that is a bigger issue, that everyone, of course, wants the recognition, the reputation that comes with the role, even if they know that the next 3 years of their life will be a horrible situation. They can't possibly commit to these papers. So I think if we fix that, look, I know this is great reputational gain, but can you really commit to being a good editor that reads, carefully reads each paper and is ready to, let's say, be directive in editing a paper? If you cannot do it, just don't, do it in 5 years' time or something. I think that's a bigger issue, that we have too many editors that do it and sort of, I'll do it whenever I get the chance, or you do it while you can do it, which then goes back to this point that sometimes we are being editors for too long, I think. There's this, I do think there's this thing called fatigue. It's sort of like it's just not the same anymore when you had 50 papers over the last 3 years, and then you get another one, and you've been asked to do another turn and another turn and another turn. So I think a healthy, turnaround time, like a short tenures, keep the cycle going, get fresh blood in, probably with a promotion-based system like what you talked about, that people earn their rank and move up the ranks if they perform well and so forth, but also mindful of the actual commitment that it takes. Because it's a big job. You're deciding on people's careers, and, wife came to realize people's lives. These are people that just had their first baby, that just moved to town, and they need this paper. And here you are, and it's really quick to say, like, I'm sorry, here's a desk reject and a recycled part of that letter from this other template that I had. And, so sometimes makes you wonder whether you're giving due justice to the situation in which this paper was born out. From.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a case by case. 2 quick points I want to make before I want to say something about ICIS as well.
Yeah.
So, this desk reject thing, if you desk reject a paper that has some merit, it's not all about laziness. It's also about the frame of the senior editor. Often successful scholars feel this is the right way, right? And what if it's a misfit of the right way as conceptualized by the senior editor or EIC, right? And the scholarship. I think it sometimes behooves us to give the opportunity for the community to speak. And Nick, I do not want to oppose your perspective. Your perspective is very good, but I wouldn't use it myself drastically. For example, I could start with, I'm going to reject 20% of the submissions in ISR. First of all, I'm not qualified to do that because there are genres of papers I don't understand. So I'm actually creating this contribution statement, which every author must submit. I can take the contribution statement and start rejecting. I think that would be a mistake. I think what we need to do is, yes, at the edges, we can see these are surely not going to make it. But we have to be very conservative in terms of eliminating, because think of the author. They worked 3 years to make this paper. And it's like, okay, no, get out. This is dismissal.
Well, you're an incredibly sympathetic, empathetic person, and you're so kind. And to me, it's one of these, right? If someone sends me a machine learning paper, you're right. I can't judge whether it's, but they send the same paper to Abbasi. Yeah, actually, he can. And especially since he's been around long enough, he's seen it, right? And it's like, all right, do I see the nuts and bolts? If someone sends me a qualitative paper that's well written, there's a construction, they understand the theory they're drawing from, and they have then yeah, I'd be like, okay, let's see if we can. If they sent me something where they clearly show no. And you've seen these kind of papers, a qualitative paper where they're trying to mix like 5 different, theoretical angles. Then it's a totally not integrated data set, and they're not They're not showing a rich view of their data or anything like that. There's no real evidence of some coding process. And then their conclusions have nothing to do with their setup. And it's like, you know what? I don't need reviewers to tell me that there's a problem with this paper. I could just go back to them, give them some good advice and say, listen, you need to engage in a conversation. You need a little more. Go look at some recent articles in MISQ or ISR and look at the way they present qualitative research, and then, do that. And it's a polite reject. But in a situation like that, where it's obvious to me this paper is not going to go past the first round, they will still send it to review. That's what I'm talking about, desk reject, right? I'm not talking about a paper where it's just got some typos and whatever, but it's actually a really thoughtful, good work. Come on. So that's the whole point. We have to trust the discretion of our SEs. Yeah. And if the SE is not someone we can trust, then they shouldn't be SE. And in their area, they should know the sorts of things. And my problem is, as a reviewer, because I still do reviews, I get many of that first type of paper, where it's like,
you shouldn't have.
You know what? This has no business ever. A reviewer should never see this, because some editor should use their judgment and not waste the valuable resources on a paper that clearly is not ready to be submitted.
Yeah, Nick, I agree. I agree. But think of the situation, me, a young scholar, doing a positivist case study, being dismissed on the desk that this is not a valid case research, right? Or the hermeneutics paper being called a lean form of hermeneutics because it was validation hermeneutics and not phenomenological hermeneutics. So these issues are there even in the qualitative world, which is what prompted my editorial in JS. Hey, I know time is running out, so I want to say something about ICIS, right?
Please do. Okay. Please do.
And so, ICIS, we are very excited that this year ICIS is finally going to India. Why I say finally going to India is because India has been at the center of the IS services boom globally, right?
Yeah.
And
that's true. For decades.
For decades. And there are quite a few Indian origin scholars throughout the globe who are engaged. And there is an amazing number of Indian scholars in India who are waiting to emerge.
Yeah.
So in terms of, sort of AIS wants to embrace a larger community and develop different regions of the world. And indeed, the region 3 is a fast growing, with China, India, with Vietnam, even Indonesia. There are lots of countries that are growing very fast. And so I think it is a commitment that AIS had to go to different regions, right? And also because we all sort of seem to embrace multiculturalism, globalism, and so on, I think it is good to have a little bit of variety of, today we have Switzerland, then we have, India, then we have China, etc., etc. So, and then we have Latin America, we are going to have AMSIS in Panama. So I think the location is something that we as a community have said that this is something we should do. And every conference has, some cost, and every conference has some inconvenience, but there's also something that changes our worldview. Yeah. So I think there is some merit to going to places that are not considered ordinary. There are lots of people who have read about India, but probably not in their bucket list. And I think this is a great way to go to India within a bubble, get out of the bubble one day, see how it is, and then if you like it, go even further out of the bubble, otherwise come out. So I think those are some things I feel people should take into consideration. The other thing I should say is, the journey to Hyderabad is not necessarily as onerous as it would seem. So from North America, I'm telling you, from North America, some of the flights will say +1 or +2, right? But if you think of it, actually the number of hours is 20 hours.
Yeah.
So it is not as if it is that far away. Likewise, from Europe, Austin is actually farther than Hyderabad.
Oh, yeah? All right.
Yeah, I mean, you can check it. But the bottom line is that we as a community have committed to being a global community. And so I think we should all welcome the opportunity. And I'm not talking about personal circumstances is always a reason why one does not go. That's okay.
Right.
But I feel that it will be a wonderful ICIS. It will be culturally rich. It will have very good papers. We have, I believe, 1,200 plus submissions. So I think the submissions, there's a lot of energy. I have a lot of colleagues who have said we are going to be there. We're looking forward to it. We will do all kinds of cultural activities from yoga to dancing, right? Nice. There will be a lot of color, a lot of fun.
The food will be amazing.
Indian food is the best food in the world, I would say.
And what is more, we are going to have food of variety. Whereas for people who want to stay with the familiar, they will get familiar food. People who want to expect, so for me, it is always a continuum approach, a portfolio approach. So you're not one or the other. So I hope that the community sort of comes to India. Maybe that will be their only time in their life. Maybe some of them will go back after that. Some of them will say, I stay away from it forever. That's up to them. But this is a great opportunity to come to India, to enjoy it, to have a great conference, actually talk to the people who lead the IT services. We have lots of such industry folks who are planning to. So anyway, I wanted to just say a few things about ICIS because there are all kinds of sort of narratives around ICIS that are there.
And I'm at fault for that too, because I was grousing about how far away it was from me. So, but we had some of my Indian friends on various social medias and emails to me and everything kind of be like, dude, what are you doing? So no, I agree. I think Hyderabad, I've been there a few times visiting ISB and it's wonderful. There are local attractions. The food is phenomenal. And I think,
and I think I think Supra, you put it right. I think we got carried away. I'm not even sure we meant to say this, to be honest. But the reality is that what I see is I actually really like the model that AI has to rotate the regions. And to be honest, for me personally, this was the prime reason I still haven't gone to AOM, because it's always in Boston and always in Chicago. These 2-3 places, they're always in the same location. So I think it's great that we do this. First and second, I also think that at the moment after the pandemic, I think the role of conferences is changing, and a lot of conferences are being questioned. Yeah, so if you think some of them literally do not make it anymore because the people are not coming and so forth. And I think as a community, we need our own conference. I'm not sure we need every single IS conference anymore, but we certainly do need the one big global. Every IS scholar comes to this, and this got to be ISIS. And, so from that vantage point, wherever it is, we all need to go. Because imagine a world where we wouldn't have ISIS anymore. I mean, that would not be a good place. So, that sounds really wrong if you think about it. Imagine a world we don't have ISIS.
We're not gonna...
ICIS, of course, right?
Jan, I have to say that if I'm proud about our community in one thing, apart from the academics and all the intellectual contributions, it's our global nature. My colleagues in other disciplines are just sort of so amazed that we have friends all over the world. We have collaborators all over the world. We get invited all over the world. We invite people from all over the world. This is a result of a very visionary AIS sort of, it's a commitment. And I think and we are so well traveled. We get to see, Shanghai, we get to see Auckland, we get to see Copenhagen. I mean, it's simply amazing. And so I think, funds aside, there's always a budgetary issue. There's always a personal issue that one's health is not so well, so they are not going to drive over 50 miles from their home. That's okay. But I think the community itself needs to sort of sometimes allow themselves to go to unfamiliar.
Well, and that's super. I know that I get that, but I also know that this December thing has always sucked, right? Because when my kids were little, I missed so many of their things and now I have 2 daughters going to college, and it's like, that's when they come home is during ISIS, right? So, and I realized that AIS has tried to move the time, but there's no alternative time that's any better, I guess.
It's like any other social system. It's not a perfect system, but it's very difficult to actually find a better system. So,
and Nick, I'm not talking about you or Jan or anyone else.
No.
Circumstances are there, but that does not mean the community. Everyone doesn't have daughter coming that day, right?
Right.
You can come back from India and still open presents and be ready for Christmas. No problem. Yeah. Because you'll be back by 15th or 16th. But the important thing is this is one chance to go to India. Not everyone is fortunate to be invited to ISB. For you, it's like, okay, I can go there next month, but not others. So this is a great way for people to come enjoy and take that little bit of India that they are comfortable with. They'll be in a bubble. It'll be like being in any country. And then they go out and see a little bit of India. And then maybe they say, I want to do Taj Mahal. Maybe they want to do Goa. All those things are feasible, along with, I think, a brilliant program that we hope to have.
No, I think you had some wonderful arguments there, and also a wonderful closing statement about our community. And I think you're right? So if this is a wonderful achievement on the social side, that we've actually grown to become a global community. And I'm old enough to, realize in the early days, it wasn't quite like this. And AIS has taken steps to become global. And that's easily said and very difficult to actually do. And I think they've taken giant strides, and rotating ISIS is one important vehicle. And I think they have achieved that. And I think you're right in the sense that you reminded me of how many wonderful places I have been because there was an IS conference that allowed me or gave me the opportunity to go. So yeah. And to be honest, I haven't actually been to India, and like I should get on that plane and go there. Right. So let's see what happens. Right. So the year's still long. Let's see if we can make it. I think at the moment I have the papers that have been submitted to ISIS. So we got to do some serious reviews there and so forth.
Consult me for the best flights.
Yeah.
Consult me for the best flights and the best places to go. Taj Mahal, Goa, whatever. I think there's enough to do. Iconic places or the experience. I think there's just so much to do. And India is not the India we left. India is a booming place today.
But Supra, if this thing with ISR doesn't work out, you have a blooming career in tourism. I tell you that much. So with that, I think, look, this has been a wonderful episode, a bit long. We had some technical issues, but so many gems in here. Supra, we know how busy you are. Actually, we don't, but we have a slight idea of how busy you must be. Thank you for taking the time. I mean this seriously. You've taken a lot of time to talk with us today. We appreciate that. Thanks for coming on the show.
It's a pleasure. You two guys are, intellectually leaders. You are sort of engaging a lot of our young scholars, probably even older scholars. I think this is great service. And so please carry on. I wish you the best. And please support ICIS, AIS, and ISR. I know you are both with MIS.
I have to quit bad-mouthing things, is what he's telling me, Rucker. I have to quit grousing.
All right. Thank you, Supra. This was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.